In the cafe, at the only table where smoking was allowed, Sophia elegantly brought a cigar to her lips with her long fingers. The rose-colored lighter flickered, illuminating her delicate features. Her eyes seemed veiled in a mist, making her appear otherworldly. She was waiting for a blind date. Taking a deep drag, she exhaled slowly, enveloping herself in a haze of smoke. She had been sitting there for an hour, her irritation growing steadily. But she knew she had to get married. The cafe door opened again, catching her attention. A middle-aged couple in their 50s entered her view. Glancing at her cigarette and the surrounding smoke, Sophia remained unmoved, continuing to smoke nonchalantly. She watched as the couple approached her, their eyes filled with scrutiny.
Was it really so unbecoming for a woman to smoke? She didn't think so. She liked it, and that was enough.
She knew the rumors about Jonathan, his aversion to women was unparalleled. His company, from top executives to ordinary employees, was exclusively male. Perhaps, as the rumors suggested, he was simply not interested in women. So, it was understandable that he was absent from this blind date. However, having his parents attend in his place was quite unexpected.
Sometimes, smoking was a good thing.
Excuse me, are you Sophia?
Yes, I am Sophia.
Thomas.
Linda.
They introduced themselves, their tones filled with pride.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
She wanted to bow, but something about their arrogance made her dislike them.
Please, sit.
Thank you.
She sat down gracefully, her demeanor more like someone negotiating than someone on a blind date.
Sophia, Jonathan had an urgent matter at the company, so he couldn't make it. He sent us instead. I hope you don't mind.
It's fine, Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Good. Since you're so understanding, I'll get straight to the point.
Please, go ahead.
Sophia, if you're willing, I can arrange for you to start working at the company tomorrow.
Isn't this about marriage?
Well.
Mr. Smith, please go ahead. I won't mind.
Oh, I'm afraid Jonathan might not attend the wedding, which could cause you some inconvenience.
It's fine. I don't need a wedding. But I do need a marriage certificate.
She despised the idea of being someone's mistress. She would rather have a loveless marriage, even if it was a lifeless fortress. Thomas and Linda were momentarily stunned, then exchanged glances. They both nodded in agreement.
All right.
Okay, let me know when it's done. I'll start working at Smith Corporation. Please take care of me, Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
She was about to become their daughter-in-law, so a bit of polite pretense was a sign of respect for her elders. The entire matchmaking session, from start to finish, took only 5 minutes to discuss all the important matters. Thomas and Linda hadn't even had a chance to sip their coffee before Sophia excused herself and left. Despite the politeness, she didn't want to stay with people who didn't like her. She knew the Smiths didn't like her. As she walked out of the cafe, she didn't look back, leaving the couple staring coldly at her retreating figure. Outside the cafe, the sunlight was beautiful. She walked lightly on the sidewalk, still tasting the bitterness of the coffee in her mouth. She didn't like adding sugar to her coffee, she preferred the truth, even though the truth was often the most brutal. The next morning, Sophia was sleeping soundly when her phone on the bedside table rang, waking her up. Groggily, she picked up the phone.
Hello, who is this?
Is this Miss Emily?
Yes.
She was slowly waking up, but the voice was unfamiliar. Few people knew this number, so she found it strange.
Miss Emily, you have a package. If you're home, please open the door.
A package? She couldn't think of anyone who would send her something. However, curiosity got the better of her. She slowly put on her coat and went to open the door. After signing for it, a beige envelope was handed to her. She closed the door casually, walking back to her bedroom while tearing open the envelope. Inside was a marriage certificate. She was stunned, not expecting the Smiths to act so quickly. It made sense, considering Jonathan was already 35. The urgency of the elderly couple was understandable. She had always thought Jonathan was an old, outdated man, so she had refused to look at his photo. But now that she saw it, she realized she was wrong. The man's face not only had a mature charm but also a touch of handsomeness. She pressed her finger firmly on his forehead in the photo and smiled.
Don't fall in love with me, or you'll regret it.
Because she didn't love him. She quickly washed up, got dressed, and then sat in the living room, picking up the phone. It was a familiar number she had seen countless times, but this was only the second time she had called it. The first time was for her mother. This second time was also for her mother. When the call connected, she didn't wait for the other person to speak.
As you wished, I've married Jonathan. No wedding, just a marriage certificate. I'll start working at Smith Corporation tomorrow. My mother is now your responsibility.
With that, Sophia hung up the phone with a bang. She had said it all in one breath. Looking at the phone she had just put down, she knew the other person would call back. Sure enough, as soon as the thought crossed her mind, her phone rang. Glancing at the caller ID, Sophia smiled lightly and pulled the phone cord out of the wall. If it weren't for her mother, she wouldn't have married, not in a lifetime. But now, this was fine too. Marrying a man who, like her, wouldn't love her meant no debts, no harm. That afternoon, Sophia went to the mall and bought 2 absolutely conservative suits, paired with a pair of wide-framed black glasses and black high heels. When she stood in front of the mirror, nodding with satisfaction, the sales clerk behind her was shaking her head. She smiled indifferently, it was her choice, and it had nothing to do with others. In the morning, Sophia quickly got herself ready and headed to the Smith Corporation building in a blue suit. Without a car, she took the bus. Ignoring everyone's comments, she walked straight into the Smith Corporation building.
Miss, who are you here to see?
She took off her glasses, which she had worn for Jonathan, not for the security guard. She still wanted to get inside.
I am Mrs. Smith.
What did you say?
Move aside, I am Mrs. Smith, Jonathan's wife.
With that, she walked past the security guard and headed towards the lobby.
You stop!
The security guard was stunned for a moment before realizing he needed to chase after her. This woman seemed to have 2 faces. With glasses, she looked old-fashioned, but without them, she looked gentle and beautiful. Sophia smiled at the security guard running towards the elevator and elegantly pressed the button for the top floor. Jonathan, she was here to turn him into a real man. That was her mission in marrying into the Smith family. As for how far this marriage would go, she didn't care at all. The elevator stopped. Sophia put on her glasses again, and everything in front of her was tinted with a faint color. Smith Corporation was indeed impressive. Not only was the lobby on the first floor luxurious, but even Jonathan's exclusive floor was decorated with great elegance. Although it was only in black and white, it was pleasing to the eye. Unexpectedly, her husband had good taste. Without knocking, she pushed open the heavy glass door. Inside was Jonathan's secretary's office, and a man was indeed sitting at the desk. Since she entered Smith Corporation, she hadn't seen a single woman. She even wondered if the cleaning staff were all men. She walked straight to the secretary, grabbed the pen from his hand, and said unceremoniously,
Sir, you're fired.
The secretary was stunned and turned to look at her.
Who are you?
Jonathan's wife.
She made it clear that she was Jonathan's wife, not just Mrs. Smith.
Ah.
The male secretary's mouth dropped open, looking at her as if she were a monster.
Now, I am the CEO's secretary. You can leave.
Impossible! I need to see the CEO.
You can go see the CEO, but in the end, you still have to leave. And the compensation of $20,000 I prepared for you will no longer be yours.
She smiled lightly and pushed the secretary's chair towards the door, then calmly sat in the chair he had just vacated.
Mrs. Smith,
The secretary was intimidated by her presence and couldn't tell if she was telling the truth or not. Sophia ignored him and picked up the desk phone, calling the finance department.
Mr. Johnson, settle Mr. Wilson's salary. If it's done in the morning, compensate him with $20,000. If it's done in the afternoon, no compensation.
She had been given the authority by Thomas to manage $20,000 a month in the company. Of course, the money had to be accounted for, and she was only using $2,000 now, a small amount.
Relieved, it's fine, Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Serious? Good. Since you're so understanding, I'll get straight to the point.
Polite, please, go ahead.
Hopeful, Sophia, if you're willing, I can arrange for you to start working at the company tomorrow.
Taken aback, isn't this about marriage?
Hesitant, well.
Encouraging, Mr. Smith, please go ahead. I won't mind.
Serious, oh, I'm afraid Jonathan might not attend the wedding, which could cause you some inconvenience.
Relieved, it's fine. I don't need a wedding. But I do need a marriage certificate.
Sophia despised the idea of being someone's mistress. She would rather have a loveless marriage, even if it was a lifeless fortress. Jonathan coughed loudly in the otherwise silent conference room, drawing everyone's attention back to Sophia.
President, everyone is here. Can we start?
A flicker of admiration flashed in Jonathan's eyes. To handle her responsibilities so well within just an hour without any handover was no ordinary feat, but she was born the wrong gender. He didn't like women, especially those his parents forced on him. With a slight nod, Jonathan began the meeting. He deliberately used the materials Sophia had prepared instead of his own pre-prepared ones. From start to finish, there wasn't a single mistake in her documents. For the 2-hour-long meeting, Sophia quietly took notes, as if she didn't exist, allowing the department heads to gradually adapt to her presence. After the meeting, Sophia organized her shorthand notes and prepared to leave with Jonathan. She had succeeded in her first battle. He wanted her to make a mistake in front of everyone, but that was out of the question.
President, you missed an agenda item.
What?
You forgot to announce that Sophia is now your secretary. Since she was brought here, it was an implicit acknowledgement of her role, wasn't it?
After speaking, she walked past him without stopping, a faint scent of soap wafting past Jonathan. His lips curled slightly. Although this woman wasn't attractive, strangely, he didn't dislike her. It was almost unbelievable. Throughout the day, she managed her work without anyone's help. By the end of the afternoon, she had already prepared Jonathan's schedule for the next 3 days.
President, please review this. If there are no issues, I'd like to leave for the day.
As a secretary, if she had to work overtime, she would consider herself a failure. She had her own life in the evenings and didn't want any further involvement with Jonathan. He was handsome, but that was his business. She knew that keeping someone intrigued didn't mean sticking to them 24/7, but rather showing up occasionally and then stepping back. Jonathan glanced at the clear and smooth table she had prepared, a completely new design unlike anything he had seen before. The list included all his activities for the next 2 days, and after mentally checking, he found nothing missing.
Is the title of Mrs. Smith really that important to you?
Sophia shook her head, trying to keep her emotions in check.
It's fine, Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Good. Since you're so understanding, I'll get straight to the point.
Please, go ahead.
Sophia, if you're willing, I can arrange for you to start working at the company tomorrow.
Isn't this about marriage?
Thomas hesitated, unsure whether to speak.
Mr. Smith, please go ahead. I won't mind.
Oh, I'm afraid Jonathan might not attend the wedding, which could cause you some inconvenience.
So that was it. Sophia smiled again.
It's fine. I don't need a wedding. But I do need a marriage certificate.
She despised the idea of being someone's secret companion. She would rather have a loveless marriage, even if it was a lifeless fortress. The transparent elevator glass reflected the bustling streets of Tea City. This city was beautiful, but not everyone living here was.
Sophia took out her phone and quickly dialed a number.
Mom, how are you today?
Sophia, I'm doing fine. Your dad came today. He'll be with me for the surgery tomorrow.
Sophia's heart skipped a beat.
Mom, do you need me to take care of you?
No need. It's just a minor surgery, and with your dad here, I'll be fine. You just focus on your work.
Sophia knew who her mom's heart truly belonged to.
Okay, Mom, then I won't come.
Once a woman falls in love, she becomes so humble, and her world revolves only around the man she loves. But how many men in this world can truly be trusted?
Sophia thought of Jonathan's parents. Despite their disdainful looks, they were a respectful couple. There had never been any negative rumors about their marriage in Tea City.
Maybe there really was love in this world, but it had nothing to do with her.
After buying groceries and some daily necessities at the supermarket, Sophia returned to her place. She enjoyed being alone.
Quickly washing the vegetables and putting the rice in the cooker, the aroma of the rice gave her a sense of happiness, but it was a happiness that belonged only to her.
The phone in the living room suddenly rang. Sophia rushed out of the kitchen to answer it.
Hello, this is Sophia.
Sophia, you're really at home. Have you cooked? If not, come home and eat.
Oh, no need. I've already cooked.
Tea was already dark outside, and Sophia was hungry.
Sophia, then come home for dinner tomorrow. I'll ask Jonathan to come too. Our family of 4 hasn't even had a proper meal together.
Sophia thought about Linda's attitude yesterday and compared it to today.
Mom, maybe in a few days. He's not used to it yet.
Sophia knew it better than anyone. He had given Jonathan a hard time today.
But actually, men needed to be taught a lesson sometimes. The fact that he didn't drive her away proved that he didn't dislike her, which was a small victory for her.
When she arrived at the Blue Bar, it was exactly 10 o'clock at night. She only gave herself 2 hours. By midnight, she had to go back, as she had to be Jonathan's secretary the next day.
Wearing a knee-length rose-red fishtail dress and heavy smoky makeup, when Sophia stepped into the Blue Bar, the night was at its peak.
For 3 years, whenever she could, she was a spectator at the Blue Bar. With a glass of whiskey, she could sit for 2 hours.
She always sat in the same corner, a table for 2, but she was always alone.
The waiter came over, placing a glass of whiskey on her table without asking. Sophia's fair hand gracefully picked up the transparent glass, watching the barely perceptible ripples in the liquid, just like her heart, never at peace.
The bar was noisy, but around her, it was as still as a dead pond, devoid of any sound. Watching the men and women indulging in their revelry, she felt she could no longer fit into that world. She was unhappy, deeply unhappy. As she took a sip of her drink and slowly put down the glass, a shadow suddenly fell over her, blocking her view of the dance floor. She looked up leisurely, her smoky eyes filled with a misty gaze at the man before her. With just one glance, she was stunned. It was Jonathan. In an instant, alarm bells rang in her head. Was he following her? Had he found her? Stay calm, she told herself. She needed to steady her nerves. After all, the woman she was now was completely different from the prim and proper secretary she was during the day. Even she couldn't believe the reflection in the mirror that morning was herself.
Sir, you're blocking my view.
I didn't know my wife had this side to her at night.
Please have a seat, Mr. Smith. Didn't expect Mr. Smith to have such sharp eyes. This drink is on me.
Sophia ordered a whiskey, lounging lazily in her chair. Jonathan sat down directly, making the space a bit cramped. Sophia frowned slightly.
Take your time with the drink, Mr. Smith. I need to go now. Oh, by the way, your parents invited us for dinner tomorrow.
Still in a casual manner, Sophia finished speaking and stood up to leave, but she was unexpectedly pulled into a strong embrace. The faint fragrance on her body made Jonathan momentarily dazed, even giving him the illusion that this Mrs. Smith wasn't so bad after all. At least, she was much better than the old-fashioned persona she had at the company. Things spiraled out of control from there. When Sophia opened her eyes again, she felt an intense soreness all over her body, and the pair of strong arms around her waist almost made her cry out. Jonathan, awakened by her movements, simply adjusted his position and pulled her closer.
Don't move, sleep a bit longer.
The morning atmosphere was strangely quiet, and Sophia remained still. From that day on, it seemed she had solidified her identity as Mrs. Smith, and Jonathan's attitude took a complete turn, as did his parents. Even when Sophia became pregnant, she still felt Jonathan's tenderness was somewhat unreal.
What are you thinking about?
Wondering why you've suddenly been so good to me.
I've known you for many years before you knew me. Do you think I'm the type to casually go on blind dates and get married quickly?
Sophia's heart inexplicably fluttered. Everything seemed to fall into place. It turned out, from the very beginning, this was a carefully laid plan, a sweet trap Jonathan had set just for her.